You today out trailer. This is a dark sword armory archer's sword. Now let's see if I can remember all the specs. From there to there, I think 36 and a half. From there to there, 29 and a half, and then I think it's like whatever the remainder is on the handle. Like all the dark sword armory stuff, this thing is incredibly beautiful. Beautiful kind of hand craftsmanship here in Canada. I've always said, we don't need to outsource any more labor overseas. People can build this stuff at a good wage, competitively priced here in my own country. There's no reason to be doing this, sending this stuff overseas. I'm not saying this stuff overseas isn't built. Well, some of it is, some of it isn't, but this is what the archer sword looks like, up close and personal. The weight is only 2.9 pounds, whatever that works out to. Or is it 2 pounds and 9 ounces? I should really look at the specs before I do these reviews. Bad on me. 2¼ inches here for the width, and it's quite a beefy little handle on it. And of course, I love these death spikes on it. This thing is so dangerous to throw around. I've got to tell you right now, like the sword itself is sharp enough. It's, medieval sword sharp, like an axe or something like that. It's meant for chopping, right? But these things will draw blood. You have to be careful when you're throwing this around that you don't hook yourself. It is just dangerous. That's why I like it so much. There's the pommel. Get a better. And again, you can see the hand making it. It looks a little bit off-centered, but actually, it kind of needs to be, because if it was that, because I don't know if my hand will capture it or not. But when I'm holding it, I'm trying not to put a hole in the trailer here. Oh, oops! I dropped my sword. There goes my trailer. You see how that goes past my wrist? So that's not so bad, When you flip it over the other side, it might rub a bit, but it's not so bad. Of course, it's peened on, so that means it's pounded in there, so that it does not. Even a short sword like this is kind of, you gotta watch out inside. It's peened on, so it's as tight as it's going to get. We have this beautiful leather grip. Let's see if I can get too much shine and not enough shine, and I'm ready to have some windows here for the good lighting, but yeah. So anyway, that's the grip. The grip itself is quite nice. It's a chunky grip, it's very beefy. This sword, the balance point is like 2.5 inches out, I believe. Again, I should look at the specs. Bought this from relics.com. I bought a bunch of stuff from them, and I like the company. The guys there seem to be pretty nice. And look at that spike. The history on this sword is kind of neat too. Price-wise was about $3.25 at the time before taxes, and then of course there was shipping and everything in Canadian dollars. Let's talk about the thickness of the blade is 2.2 millimeters, and then it tapers down. And this thing, I nicknamed this one the lightning rod. It is so freaking fast, and when I get it outside, throwing it around, when I do a kind of a handling review at this, anybody that tells me that a katana sword is superior to in handling than a medieval European sword, I say they need to pick one of these things up. If you want to fasten the hand, this thing is so dangerous to throw around because it does throw around so fast. And I've already hooked my shirt with these things. Don't ask me how I did it, but I did it. Like I say, it's so freaking dangerous even to yourself to use it. I like it. But let's talk about where did the archer sword come from? Why did kings finally decide to arm the peasants? Typically archers rose up from the ranks of peasants. And we'll do a nice flyby here. And what ended up happening is these archers would, they were, I wouldn't say disrespected, but they didn't get the nobility that a knight would get. We're going to face this guy in battle, mano a mano. Archers were a standoff type of weapon. They would take careful aim on somebody and or shoot as a group in a mass, into a mass group. And of course, the effects of the archers were quite devastating. But it was considered kind of non-chivalrous and kind of cowardly to be an archer because, again, you took careful aim with very little risk to yourself. So what would end up happening is you would get paid probably the lowest. Like a spearman, okay, he'd still be sort of going toe-to-toe, so he'd get paid probably a little better. A knight would definitely get paid the best. The only guy that was lower in respect, not that they disrespected him, but they just didn't get the nobility, was a crossbowman, because then you didn't even need the skills of an archer. You know what I mean? Like you didn't have to hold the weight of the bolt, whereas an archer had to hold the weight of the bow to draw back the arrow. Beautiful stitching on this thing. And so what happens was, as the peasants rose up from the ranks, it's like kings would, say, okay, well, these are, we might not look at them very chivalrous, but we do understand their value. And their value was quite simple. You could win or lose a war depending on your archers. Back then that was, kind of the first form of mobile artillery, if you really think about it. Trebuchets were heavy, they were slow to load, but you get 1,000 archers, night arrows, fire arrows. I mean, that's quite devastating, you know what I mean? They were definitely effective. And in the Battle of 1066, the Battle of Hastings in 1066, archers really proved what their value was. So at first they weren't armed, but the biggest problem an archer had was, once the enemy got close enough, the advantage of distance, was no longer the advantage, and, one guy with a sword could probably run through a line of archers pretty fast, you know what I mean? They had no way to defend themselves. But as, again, kingdoms would get a little bit more wealthy because they would win, winners tended to, plunder a bit, they would then build cheaper swords. Like this would be like a lead archer sword. They wouldn't get something this fancy. They'd probably just get like basically a flat blade, lightly sharpened. There would be no detail work like this. This is a very, this would be like the lead archer would get this, and this is not the type of sword the typical archer would get, but this is a typical representative of a sword of that size in the day. This would also fall into the same category as, say, like a castle sword or a personal arming sword, one-handed. And this thing actually throws around really fast. It's really snappy, Can't wing it around in here. I'll put a hole in my trailer. I know I want a skylight, but, I'll do it with other tools. So that was the idea behind these things, was just, close quarters combat, really. I mean, I'll explain it more in another video just because there's, just too much to cover. But, again, this is just a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Yeah, there we go. You see my reflection. And I can't say enough about it. I love the company Dark Sword Armory. Completely functional sword. And my two-handed Norman sword, I have so much fun with that thing. That thing is just, I nicknamed that one Destructor because I bash it over everything. I mean, these things are great therapy. Yeah, you're having a bad day, grab this and just go bash something with it. And no people, please, but, inanimate objects. You'll feel good and you'll get good exercise and you'll be passive after. With that said, there we go. That's the archer sword, and you're going to see more of this. I'm not going to beat this sword up too much. It's just too pretty. But I will show you some handling techniques of a shorter sword, and what the advantages of these shorter swords that are wider here, and what the advantage is to a one-handed sword over a two-handed sword. And then I'll do the other video vice versa. So I hope you enjoyed that. Any questions, just ask me about it. Alright, so I've got a bit of a sword review for you today. Ow. Trailer. This is a Dark Sword Armory Archer's Sword. Now, let's see if I can remember all the specs. From there to there, I think 36.5. From there to there, 29.5. And then, I think it's like whatever the remainder is on the handle. Like all the Dark Sword Armory stuff, this thing is incredibly beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful kind of hand craftsmanship here in Canada. I've always said, we don't need to outsource any more labor overseas. People can build this stuff at a good wage, competitively priced here in my own country. There's no reason to be doing this, sending this stuff overseas. I'm not saying this stuff overseas isn't built. Well, some of it is, some of it isn't, but this is what the Archer sword looks like, up close and personal. The weight is only 2.9 pounds, whatever that works out to. Or is it 2 pounds and 9 ounces? I should really look at the specs when before I do these reviews.